boys and girls. Happy Thursday. It is the day after Earth Day, and I just wanted to give a shout out to Owen and Jackson for sending me the wonderful pictures of the things that you did on Earth Day. I appreciate you guys sending me those pictures, and I hope you had fun doing the activity. Today we are going to pick up with the Wild Robot Escapes, and we are very excited because yesterday we left off with a cliffhanger. So today we're starting with chapter 64, The Sea Creature. Bright Bill hovered on the wind and watched his poor mother sinking into the depths. He could still see her body sparkling brightly against the darkness, but she was fading fast. The goose closed his eyes, hoping this was all a bad dream. He heard the distant horns of ships by the seaport. He heard buoys clanging in the harbor. He heard ocean waves churning and frothing, louder and louder and louder and louder. The goose opened his eyes and saw the ocean bulging upward. A giant sea creature was rising from the deep. It breached the surface and sent waves rolling away. The creature had a large mouth and long fins and a wide back that curved down into the water. There was a loud burst and mist shot up from a blowhole. As you might have guessed, reader, that giant creature was a whale. Mrs. Williams loves whales. More of the whale emerged from the darkness until something sparkled in the sunlight. It was Roz. She was sprawled across the whale's back, wet, limp, and lifeless. So let's get to chapter 65 and see what happens. Chapter 65, The Whale. The whale swam along the surface of the ocean, keeping our robot safely above the water, gently moving her away from the rough waves. Bright Bill couldn't believe what he was seeing. Once the shock wore off, he fluttered down to the whale's back and leaned over his mother. There was no life in her eyes or her body, so the goose did the only thing he could think of. Click. Roz's eyes began to glow. She uttered some human noises, and then, in the language of the animals, the robot said, "Oh, Bright Bill, am I happy to see you?" The goose squawked with joy and hugged his mother's face, but she didn't move. She couldn't move. The robot had lost the use of her limbs. There were a few tense minutes and a few nervous glances, but as the sun beat down and the wind rushed over her, Roz felt her body drying out. Slowly, gradually, power returned to her arms, then her legs, and then she sat up and hugged her son. Bright Bill breathed a sigh of relief. "Mama, when you disappeared below the water, I thought you were gone forever." "So did I," said Roz. "As I sank deeper and deeper, the ocean squeezed my body tighter and tighter. I lost control of my legs and my arms. The last thing I remember was a huge shape swimming toward me, and then I automatically shut down." "That huge shape was a whale," squawked the goose. "We're riding on her back right now." A low moan rumbled up through the whale's body. She splashed the water with her fins and took long, wheezing breaths and sprayed mist high into the air. Roz paid close attention to the whale's behavior and understood what she was saying. The whale's name was Coral, and she was thrilled to meet our friends. She explained that a flock of geese had flown over the bay and regaled the coastal birds with the amazing story of the wild robot and her son, the goose. The coastal birds shared the story with the fish and the dolphins and anyone who would listen. In time, the story spread to every creature in the bay. When Coral saw the robot rowing and the goose flying overhead, she knew it had to be Roz and Brightbill, so she swam behind them in case she could be helpful, and it was a good thing she did. As Coral ferried our friends across the bay, the waves grew smaller and the coastline grew larger. Houses poked out from the trees, sunbathers relaxed on the rocks, boats motored away from the piers. With so many humans around, Roz had to be careful. She lay flat against Coral's back while Brightbill flew ahead and scouted out the coastline. The goose directed the whale to a quiet, empty cove, and soon the robot was standing on dry land again. Roz asked if there was some way she could repay Coral for saving her life, but the whale was just happy to help. She winked one of her enormous eyes, and then she sank beneath the waves. Our friends marched inland, feeling lucky and grateful. But as they thought of the journey still to come, their good feelings gradually turned gloomy. Roz had nearly died crossing that bay. At some point, to get back to the island, she would have to cross an entire ocean. I like this picture. It's kind of hard to see. See the whale and Roz and Brightbill. Chapter 66, The New Land. Zoom, vroom, shoom. Automobiles were gliding up and down the road, passing fields and forests and clusters of houses. None of the passengers had any idea that a robot and a goose were watching from the weeds. Our friends had been hiding there for some time, waiting for the traffic to clear. But the automobiles kept coming. Roz noticed a drainage pipe that crossed under the road. The pipe was dark and grimy, but the travelers were getting desperate. Moving through this new land was difficult. There were more humans and robots and buildings and roads than ever before. Roz and Brightbill traveled far out of their way in wide circles just to avoid small towns. As the days passed, the scenery looked more familiar to Brightbill. He remembered flying over these lands on his first migration. He knew the towns would only get larger and closer together the farther they went. It would be much faster to sneak through the towns than to continue going around them. So as night fell, Roz put on fresh camouflage, and with her son watching from the sky, she crept into a town. Chapter 67, The Town. Pookie was a big little dog. Her body was round, her legs were short, her ears were long. Although the dog looked funny, she was serious about protecting her home. She slapped her front paws on the windowsill and stared into the night to make sure all was well outside. But all was not well. A new clump of weeds had mysteriously sprouted in the yard. Pookie needed to take a closer look. The dog whined by the back door until someone let her out. Then she scurried across the porch, down the steps, and over to the mysterious weeds. As Pookie approached, a raspy growl sounded in her throat. "Where did these weeds come from?" she said to herself, sniffing. "They weren't here this afternoon." The weeds rustled in the breeze, and that was enough to set Pookie off. The dog barked and barked and barked, and then, astonishingly, the weeds spoke to her in a clear, calm voice. "I am sorry if I disturbed you," said the weeds. Pookie stopped barking. "I was hoping to pass through without being seen," said the weeds. "But you saw me. You are a very good guard dog." Pookie resumed barking. "No, no, no. Shh," said the weeds. "Please stop barking." But there was no stopping Pookie. The clump of weeds decided to move. Like some sort of monster, the weeds rose up on 2 legs and leaped over the fence into the neighboring yard. Felix had heard Pookie barking next door, and when the weedy monster landed in his yard, he started barking as well. So the monster kept going, leaping fences from one yard to the next. And every house in the neighborhood seemed to have a dog, and they all began barking about the weedy monster. Reader, you and I know the monster was actually our robot in disguise, but the dogs never did figure out what happened that night. Roz finally slunk into the shadows behind a school building and listened as the chorus of dogs settled down. "That didn't go very well," said the goose as he landed beside his mother. "No, it did not," said the robot. "This will only be tougher in daylight." "I know. I will have to try something else." Early the next morning, the sun started rising. Automobiles started driving. Robots started running errands. However, one of those robots was not like the rest. Roz had picked every speck of dirt from her body, and now she blended in with all the normal robots going about their normal morning routines. Our robot was hiding in plain sight. Roz marched through town, turning left and right down the streets, as Brightbill watched from above. Along the way, she passed a wide variety of robots, all going about their business. There was even another Rozum robot marching around, who looked identical to our Roz, except she was shinier and had a different unit number. It occurred to Rozum Unit 7134 that if anyone noticed her unit number, it might bring a swift response from the Ricos. But as she continued past houses and shops and humans and robots, there didn't seem to be any danger. Everything was going smoothly until she heard an airship flying toward the town. Our robot felt something like dread as she waited for a sleek white ship to appear. If the Ricos found her now, there would be no escape. But the ship that appeared wasn't white. It was black, and it flew over without stopping. Roz was safe, and suddenly she was dreaming about airships. Returning to the island would be so easy with a ship. She and Brightbill would climb in, fire up the engines, and be home in no time at all. But it was an impossible dream. There was no safe way for our robot to get an airship. She had to find some other way home. First, she had to find her way out of this town. So Roz focused on her surroundings and continued marching along the sidewalks, just like a normal robot. And we will stop there and pick up with chapter 68 tomorrow, The Station. Okay, today's 365 Days of Wonder. You don't live in a world all alone. Your brothers are here too. That just means we're all in this together. We're all one big happy family, just like Mrs. Williams always talked about at school. Okay, we have 2 jokes today because I got an email from Ethan, and his joke is, what kind of dog wears a watch? On your hand, what kind of dog wears a watch? A watchdog. Good job, Ethan. And we have another joke coming from Callan. Thank you, Callan, for emailing me your joke. And his joke is, what city wears a lot of sandals? You know, sandals on your little feet. What city wears a lot of sandals? Mrs. Williams has been to this city, and it is Tokyo. Get it? Toe, like your big toe? Tokyo. And that is in what country? email me the answer. Mrs. Williams has been there, and you guys have all learned about that country. Email me and let me know what country Tokyo is in. All right, one other announcement, boys and girls. I have been attaching the Scholastic book orders, and your parents can order books, and Mrs. Williams will deliver them to your porch with a wave and a smile. And tomorrow is the deadline. I will be placing the order first thing Saturday morning. So if you and your parents would like to order some books, make sure you get on there and do that today or tomorrow. All right, boys and girls, I enjoyed reading to you today. Mwah. Love y'all.